Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to The Angel with Michael Conniff. That's me, your host. We're a podcast dedicated to angels, of course, VCs, investors, family offices, anyone who might want to invest in a startup or later rounds of capital. And I'm very happy to welcome to the podcast Katy Trost, who is a business coach of great renown in Europe. Based in the UK, originally from Germany. Welcome to the podcast, Katy. It's really a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
And I want to remind all of our listeners that we are on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Audible, Amazon, and so on. About, I think, 10 in all. We're also on YouTube for video and on Spotify for audio and video. So you can pretty much get us anywhere. And it's really cool to have Katy because Katy is a business coach at a very high level in Europe. And we're going to talk in a minute about how a founder can transition into being a CEO. And she has thought this out. She has 7 steps. It sounds a little bit like an addiction program. Maybe that's inevitable. But first, Katy, I want to hear a little bit more about your journey and how you came to this position of renown in Europe and in the UK, and I'm sure in the US as well. So, what's your journey? How does one do what you've done?
Of course. I'm actually both in the US and in the UK. I would say probably 60% of my clients are in the US and actually Canada as well. And then the other 40 are in Europe and in the UK. I focus on working mainly with tech founders and tech CEOs, usually at the Series B, C, D stage. So they already host a startup phase. They already have an executive team. They have usually about 100 to 500 employees. And I got into it through becoming an executive coach, which I actually started in New York City. Was, I think, 7 years ago or so when I did my certification. And I did very general leadership development and worked with first-time leaders, worked with people who wanted to transition their career, people who wanted to advance their career, get a promotion, etc. Some people who just wanted to get clarity on next steps. Do they want to start a business? Do they want to go freelance or completely switch sectors? And so I did that for a while and I liked it, but I just never really lit me up. So somehow I ended up in the whole tech ecosystem and the startup ecosystem and started working with CEOs. Mm-hmm. And I quickly realized that the leadership development was not enough and that there was a lot of operational challenges that they have and that there was a lot of tactical, just making decisions, leading their team and having to solve challenges on a daily. So I did a number of other certifications afterwards, OKRs, for example. I did a business coaching certification as well. That took me over a year and a half. And then I also did multiple board programs and non-executive programs just to help also CEOs manage their boards better.
And what did you do before you became a coach? Were you in marketing or sales, or did you have other interests?
Yeah, I was in marketing and not sales, marketing and branding. And I had a small agency myself and was doing lots of content actually for media outlets, was writing for other coaches, was writing for other business owners, and published them on Forbes and Success Magazine, etc. And just help them build their personal brands.
And what made you shift to being a coach? Was there kind of a precipitating event?
A friend of mine told me about it, and it was, I think, her friend who went to, I think, even Harvard. And I know we met through Harvard alumni entrepreneurs, and I think he took a coach, like a leadership or a coaching course at Harvard, and she was like, "Oh, Katy, you would love this." And I was so into personal development, and I was like, "I need to do this." So I just did the first certification because I was so passionate about it, and then after a while, I just focused more on the executive coaching and then the CEO coaching. And it really, at this point, I would say it leans a lot on advisory. There's probably 50% coaching. I also sit on advisory boards and have very much a coaching approach to in my advisory roles as well. But for my coaching clients, I also have a lot of advisory type work, I guess, where it's less about having the client find all the answers, but there's a lot of like tactical. Okay, I've seen this before 20 times, and I know what works, and I've seen what doesn't work. So it's a little bit more tactical than the typical executive coaching.
So what's the difference between being a coach and being an advisor?
Advisory is just very much pointing people in the right direction and telling them the answer, telling them what's the right solution. Obviously, always with having the other person and having the client make the final decision, and they set the direction in the end. But when you see things work in different companies, it usually it's a lot of pattern recognition and understanding what works for companies at that stage.
All right, well let's jump into the how to go from being a founder to a CEO, and let me just set the stage a little bit. I think we can all agree that founders are not always meant to be CEOs. Sometimes frequently founders are replaced as companies move up the food chain. Some founders are great at it and naturals, and I know you and I have seen both extremes of that. But the notion of your 7-step program, I guess we could call it, is that to be a founder is one thing, to be a CEO is another, and it's not necessarily easy to get from one to the other, to get from being a founder to being a CEO. So walk us through how does one do this?
Yeah, it's definitely not a program. It's just an article I wrote a while ago, and I find it quite relevant, especially usually, as I said, I usually work with Series B, C, D, and that's a different transition from a scale-up CEO to a corporate CEO. And my clients often ask me, okay, how do I go from leading 250 people to, let's say, 1,000 people? What are the changes, etc.? And this transition that we talk about today is more at the, I would say, 50 to 100 people mark. Usually after Series A or so, when you add another management layer, and all of a sudden you have an executive team or a very senior leadership team with senior VPs, etc. And to make that shift, I think is super important if you really want to lead your company to a successful exit. And the statistics are not that great, actually, because I think only 25% of founders actually IPO their company, and the other 75% are getting replaced by the board. So,
you mean by the time 25% of those who get to a B or C round?
No, to get to an IPO.
Get to an IPO. Yeah, 25% get to an IPO, but I think if you started just with all founders, it would be a tiny percentage of people get to an IPO. If you count
Exactly. But from the founders who lead their the venture to an IPO, it's usually only about 25% that actually are the founding CEOs. The other ones are externally brought in CEOs.
So what have you found? What have you found, and what did you talk about in your article?
So one of the things, before I get into the different steps or into the different areas that I think are super important to address, is the importance of it. So founder-led companies are about 4 to 5 times more successful than companies who are not led by the founder. And there was a study on it, and I'm happy to also link the study afterwards, and actually even sent the article, and you can link it to the episode. Yeah. So it's super important for the board as well to keep the founder the CEO, if that's obviously what the founder wants. For the founder, it's super important to make that transition so they are not getting replaced by a professional CEO. And so I think it makes sense to really take time, and usually in that 1 or 2 year period where the company really goes from startup to this is an actual company with 200 people plus, and they raise one round after the other, I think it really makes sense, and for founders to empathize that this is something that they want to focus on, and they want to just have on their radar. Otherwise, some people just don't want to, right? They can replace themselves and hire somebody else. It's not necessarily an easy journey. It's not right for everyone, and oftentimes it makes sense to step out, even if it's at a later stage, maybe a Series C or so, and just get somebody else in there and step into the
But there is such a thing as founder DNA, isn't it? I've read a lot about this that that very smart people who've done this many times really believe that founder DNA is essential almost all the time.
Yeah.
And how would you define founder DNA?
You just carry a very different energy. People usually, especially the early employees, they buy into you, they believe in you, they believe in your mission, while a CEO who is professional, oftentimes they are not necessarily founders, so they might be corporate CEOs, and they just have a very different view on a business than somebody who's been there with the first 2 employees and then 5 employees and, almost ran out of cash twice and just kept everybody in their seat and kept everybody committed to the mission. It's a very, very different energy that they bring than somebody who's a corporate CEO who just manages the P&L and, just, it's more left brain, I would say, and the founder is just in it with the passion and, they can engage the whole team and just drive the culture as well. So we're going to get into the culture piece as well, because it's super important. So I think the first step or the first area is to broaden the skill set in general. So in the beginning, everybody, or usually the founders, they do sales, they do marketing, they do the fundraising, they do operations. If they're technical, they might even lead the engineering team as well. So they have so many different tactical skills that they need to obviously develop and that they need to be good at. And then at one point you hire heads of departments for each of those areas. So it's not that you have to manage a group of individuals anymore, but you manage one person and they have that background and they are very likely better than you. So the whole transition goes from being an individual musician to becoming almost like a conductor. So somebody who just knows how to lead a team of leaders rather than just a lot of individuals. One of the things that I love to do is to just go in and look at, okay, what's the meeting rhythm and who do I manage when and what are their responsibilities and what does the grade look like in each one of the areas, and just putting that into the calendar and everything is taken care of in terms of the management of the heads of departments. I think it's super important. Oftentimes people want to hire a COO. I find that a few people maybe a little bit overkill, but it really depends, right, on the CEO. And some of them are very much outward facing, visionaries. They are not very good at management, and they are frankly don't want to. And I think then it makes a lot of sense to complement the gaps in the skill set with a person who's really good at it. And there's not necessarily one type of COO, and this person has to be operational and this person has to be tactical. Sometimes the founder is super good at that and they just want somebody who's more on the sales side, for example, or who's even a face to the company externally, right? So it's more about complementing the gaps of the skill set of the founder. And also to just be able to understand and I would say admit that they're not perfect and that they have weaknesses, and therefore empower the team to step up and have them take things off of your plate and have them take responsibilities for things that you probably had control over before.
How does that? How hard is that for a founder to do?
I think it really depends. Some people love it. They're like, I can't wait to have somebody in. Other people, they lie to themselves and they say, I can't wait to have somebody in, but then actually they want to keep control. And then others here just, they just want to hold on to some departments. And that's also understandable. Like, let's say, for example, in enterprise sales, like sometimes you have to just do founder-led sales for a while, and you can do it actually for quite a while. because it's enterprise, big clients, and you take on that role and you stay in a sense an individual contributor as well, while you have obviously the CEO and management hat on as well. But sometimes it's not even wrong to keep some of the responsibilities, right? Where a technical founder who just loves to code, maybe that's just something that they do, even if it's just half a day a week, and they can, they can spend time with the engineering team and get somebody else to do more of the line management, and maybe have a chief of staff who can complement you on that. But I think it's more about, okay, this is where I am at the moment, and these are the skills that I want to work on and expand on, and then filling the gaps for the ones that you don't want.
In terms of the gaps, what are the most typical gaps in a founder before you get your hands on them? What do you see over and over?
It really depends. Honestly, it really depends. Some people are natural born leaders in a sense, and they are super, super good at inspiring. When they get on the all hands meeting at the town hall, they get everybody excited about it. They're, just the life of the party, and everybody's on it. And other people, and oftentimes they actually are not that great at management. And then other people are really good at the management and operation, and they don't necessarily want to get on the town hall and all of a sudden there's 250 people and you have to welcome them all, and it's just a drag for some. So I think it really depends. And again, somebody who's technical and somebody who has a business background, somebody who has a sales background, such different personalities. So I wouldn't say there's one, gap that needs to be filled. It just really depends. But I would say the operational stuff, either they're way too operational, can't let go of it, or they're just not really good at the operational stuff at all. And that's okay as well. And that kind of,
I was just going to say, what if, let's assume for a moment that you've kind of addressed the skill set issue satisfactorily. What's next? What are the other steps that have to be gone through to make this work?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so the first one kind of bleeds into the second one, I would say. It's redefining the role, and that just needs to happen continuously at that stage. If you scale 50, 100% plus, sometimes over 100% in terms of either revenue or headcount, the role changes all the time. And to redefine the role, I think is super important, and really understand, okay, these are the 4 or 5 different responsibilities where I have clarity on the KPIs, where I have clarity on what's expected or what I expect from it actually. That means those are basically my CEO objectives or CEO OKRs, if you're familiar with the methodology, and to schedule everything in the calendar, right? So when do how much do I network? How much do I fundraise? How much do I spend on management? How much time do I spend on management? And just pre-scheduling everything in the calendar. I think it's such a game changer. And you just don't forget to do certain things, I guess. And sometimes it's really hard to do what's high impact because you maybe love the marketing piece, or you maybe love the networking piece, but you don't like other things. And 6 months pass by and you're like, oh, I actually completely neglected that. So I think it's important to just every 6 months redefine the role, talk with your team. Okay, what can I delegate to you? And then if you have a chief of staff again, they can make sure that that happens, and that you always operate in your zone of genius where you are energized by it and where you're good at it. The third piece is then building a strong exec team. And that means not just having strong individual leaders, but to have them becoming their coach and to have them work well together. And there's an amazing book, actually one of them is called The Advantage. It's all about organizational health. And the first chapter is all about the executive team and the health and alignment of the executive team, how cohesive it is. And then the second book is called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And it's basically a long version of the first chapter of the other book.
What was the name of the second book? A little more slowly. What is that again?
It's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Oh,
And
the five
the author is,
dysfunction.
yeah, the author is Patrick Lencioni. It's a quite a well-known management book, I would say. I have all my clients read it because it's sometimes when I read it and when I go through it and when I talk about it, it seems so obvious, but actually oftentimes I would say 80% of companies don't necessarily get it right. Oftentimes the individual C-level or VPs, they see their department as their number one team. That means they defend them if things don't go to plan, if the progress isn't, as they said it would be. They come to the leadership team meeting or to the executive team meeting, and they don't see their peers as their team members, right? So the whole idea is to switch the dynamic and make the C-level or the VP, basically the senior leadership team, the number one team. That means everything that's discussed here is aligned on with one message that's communicated to the rest of the company when we leave the boardroom, right? We have a general understanding of each other. We understand our different personalities. We understand our different weaknesses. We understand our different leadership styles, etc. So there's lots of stuff that I work with lots of executive teams on that topic, where we do team building, so they build more trust. That means they can have more productive discussions where they can actually disagree with each other in order to find good solutions, where they can hold each other accountable, where they can have uncomfortable conversations. And to have an executive team that operates that way, it's definitely going to help with the performance of the business, because they hold each other to a standard, right? People don't slip through and try to defend themselves and try to defend their departments.
So I think like maybe summarize this saying, you go from as a founder, you're kind of a solo act, right? And as the company grows, you've got to be part of a team. The band has to get bigger, but everybody has to be, so to speak, playing the same song. And you call that alignment. I think that's a good way to put it.
I think also the buy-in becomes a really important process. So, for example, when you do strategic planning with your exec team, the real objective is not what's the strategy. The real objective is how can I get my executive team to be fully bought into the strategy, because then execution takes care of itself. And you don't have to push it, and you don't have to tell them every month, and everybody's off track because they are the ones that came up with it. So involve your exec, have them be part of the strategic planning and the whole execution planning, and just really involve them, because if they do, they're going to be the one carrying all of the responsibility as well, right?
Yeah. So we've got about 5 more minutes. So tell us what are the other key tentpoles of this strategy that go from founder to CEO?
Of course. So the next one is transparency, and by that, and I tell this to my clients all the time, the boardroom always seems like this mysterious black box where people don't know what's going on, and they're like, oh, they're just going to take care of it, right? So I think to be super transparent with the company performance, for example, or the challenges. Obviously, there was a place for everything, right? Some things you don't want to share necessarily. If you do a mass layoff and, people are really worried, you don't need to necessarily communicate it before you have to. But otherwise, I love the work of Patrick Lencioni actually says that the chief exec is really the CRO, the chief repetition or reminder officer. You just have to say things over and over and over again for people to really internalize it.
Transparency and repetition.
Exactly. People and culture is also another point that's important. That's the fifth point or the fifth area, where you just want to standardize onboarding processes, recruiting processes for employees, align your performance management with your core strategy, meaning everything in your bonuses, etc., everything is aligned. So people just have the right incentives. I know it seems so obvious, but many companies actually don't do that. Having values that are actually cultural OKRs and not just beautiful words on the wall, but really they guide you, they tell you what behavior is encouraged, what behavior is not encouraged. Some companies go full on the performance. Some cultures go more on the niceness, and it just really depends. There is no wrong culture or right culture. It's just important to communicate it before you get people on board.
How, 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 how important is it to communicate the values precisely? Like, how important is it to be very clear what they are versus kind of having them as being sort of general rules?
I like to use them actually as a management tool. So oftentimes clients don't necessarily come to me and say, I want to now implement values. They have a challenge, and that challenge is usually underperformance. Or that challenge is, okay, we just have pockets and different pockets across the organization where people just have a completely different culture, right? So the culture builds itself if you don't set the standard for it. So they have the challenge, and then oftentimes implementing values and then using them as a management tool and having them as very clear behavioral guidelines is often the answer to it. So it's not just like implementing the values for the sake of it, but it actually has a great impact. And many of my clients, even 3-4 years later, say the values were invaluable. We still have to say once, and we can hire with them. We can just set the standard, and we can do performance plans, for example, based on them. We can give bonuses based on them. So if you can really use them, I think it's super important. I know we don't have much more time, so I'm going to go through the other two as well.
Okay, go right ahead.
So number 6 is to create more infrastructure or to just implement KPIs and OKRs. That means KPIs are health metrics. Every department has them. This is when you know, okay, if everything's green, we're good. And OKRs are basically priorities. And to set that on a company level as well as on a department level is oftentimes, again, a great solution to the challenges of misalignment or lack of clarity on strategy or people not collaborating with each other, people not taking ownership over certain objectives or over certain projects. So you get this cross-functional collaboration and ownership, and you get almost like a matrix cross-functional team where you can hold people accountable to the progress, and you just have this very clear communication and I love the methodology, to be honest, to implement OKRs, and I think actually people come to me and they are like, we want to implement OKRs.
I do have one final question about this, Katy, which is, it sounds pretty top down. Now, do I have that right, or is there a scenario where it's more bottom up?
No, it's top down, bottom up. So giving this clarity on the what, that means, for example, certain milestones, obviously, revenue targets, etc. How many new products we want to develop or introduce, how many new offices we want to open, how many more people we want to hire, etc. And really defining the goals. And then with the executive team, I love them doing the workshops around how we get there. And then the same happens at the level below that, at the management level, where we get the clarity on the what within the department, and then all of the teams come together and do the execution planning together. So it's very much top down, bottom up. But completely going bottom up, I also don't have good experience with that. And oftentimes that's actually why people want to implement it, because there's such disconnect between the annual revenue targets and then what people do, and there's just like it's usually the middle piece that's missing. So that's why I left the OKR.
Well, Katy, that was really a lot to go through, and you did it well, and you did it efficiently. I want to remind everybody you're listening to The Angel with Michael Conniff. We're here with Katy Trost, and we want to remind all of you to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. Look at it on YouTube or Spotify. Make sure to rank us, share us, do everything you can to spread the word. And I want to thank Katy Trost, a business coach in the UK who works with companies and CEOs really all over the world, US, Canada, Europe, all over the world. And where can people find you, Katy? How do they know where to find you?
You can find me on my website. That's the easiest. And that's Katy, Katy, Trost, Trost, and then /podcast. And you can find my articles. You can find actually the article we talked about today. You can find my CEO community. I have a CEO network, and then you can also look into my work more and just explore.
Sounds great. Well, I think you've been very generous to share this with us. So thanks so much for being on the Angel.
Thank you for having me.
And I want to remind all of you out there, as I like to say at the end of every broadcast, pay attention, keep listening, because we'll be back again with another podcast before you know it.